This area is just outside Ballito, more towards Tinley Manor. Now that's on the north coast of KZN. It's an area where there's been a lot of development over the past few years and many gated communities have come up. It's also an area that many people are choosing to retire in. It's very quiet and it's quite secluded away from a lot of the hustle and bustle of the other towns. This all came to a head this weekend, Yuveka, when a group of people stormed the land that we are on at the moment. And just to give you an idea of where that is, it's just outside that gated estate that you mentioned, Palm Lakes. So the piece of land behind me, I'll just move out of shot and show it to you, is where it all actually started. And this is where people came through and decided to flatten some of the land. And then over here to my left, I'll just ask Bonga to come with me, is where plots were demarcated, just like this one over here. So there are little sticks and poles that have been erected throughout this piece of land. Other parts of it have been flattened like this, and people have now marked their plots. Even further on, Yuveka, I think you'll be able to see in shot now, there's some cordon tape that's been put up. And at the moment, no one is here, but I spoke to a security guard at the Palm Lakes estate a little while ago, just before we got here. And he was saying to me that the general time for activity here is either mid-morning or late in the afternoon, and that's when he knows that people come through here and I think then try to clear out those plots that they've demarcated.
All right, so Deson, just for clarity, they're not claiming the land that's inside this estate. They want to build on the land that's outside. So who actually owns that land then, if we have the property owners saying they bought the land before South Africa became a democracy? What bit of land are they talking about? Because from what you're saying, it sounds like this group wants to now build outside of this estate.
That's right, Yuveka. It's not actually land that's within that gated community, but the understanding at this point, and we'll be getting more clarity on this a bit later, is that there are different tracts of land here. Some of it is privately owned. In fact, a motorist that just passed by now said that the plot that I'm standing on is actually owned by a gentleman who lives in one of the houses behind me. But some of the other land is owned by the estate, and it was meant to be developed for purposes of building homes later on, like I mentioned, some retirement homes as well. So it's not just one piece of land, and it's certainly not within the walls of that community.
All right, well, this brings us, Deson, I suppose, to the role of the chiefs in the area, because, I mean, these land invaders saying they were given permission by a local chief. They paid him 50 Rand per plot. You did a story a couple of months ago also on the north coast. If I'm not mistaken, it was close to Inanda on that side. Also, where there were allegations that this was a chief who had instructed land invaders to go and take the land from farmers there. I mean, this is surely, there needs to be a discussion around the role of chiefs and basically what's happening if they are indeed telling these land invaders that they can go ahead and do this.
That's right, Yuveka. In fact, I think there is that discussion taking place. In fact, one of the residents here told me that there's a meeting that's scheduled to take place in KwaDukuza, which is not far from here. It's talking about the issue that's currently taking place here. In fact, the mayor of KwaDukuza is going to be meeting me here a bit later this morning, so we'll find out a little more about that discussion. But your reference to the other story that we did is exactly that. That was also a very similar situation where those that had bought these plots of land claimed that they were given permission by the chief and that he was selling off these plots, and some of them had receipts as well saying that they had paid him for certain areas that he said belonged to him. So it'll be interesting to find out if it's a similar situation here, because as you'll remember, there's been it's been quite chaotic there in Inanda, especially with a lot of those farmers who haven't been able to farm this season. Many of their workers now having to lose their jobs as a result of this battle between for land ownership as to exactly who owns that land. And at the moment, many of them are thinking about leaving the area. So this seems to be the very early stages, and you can see that just from the demarcation. And in Inanda, on the other hand, there some people have already started erecting structures. So one would hope that this issue is resolved soon, and that meeting that we're hearing about is going to take place, and all of those parties can come together and come to some kind of solution.
But Desan, I mean, you're aware of the stories happening elsewhere around the country, just here in Protea Glen, that's the south of Johannesburg. We see some kind of pushback from residents who legitimately live on that land, and then from those who are wanting to take a piece of land. We also saw this happening in the Western Cape last week. We saw a pushback happening there where we saw resulting skirmishes between the land invaders and residents there as well. Has there been that kind of pushback from these residents in both of these stories that you've covered in KZN, or has there been any sort of communication other than this meeting that's happening now, like you say, in KwaDukuza? But are we seeing that kind of pushback where we've seen these two groups come face to face here?
Fortunately, Yuveka, from what we've been told and talking to residents here as well as the security guards there at the Palm Lakes estate, is that this land invasion wasn't violent by any means. In fact, the police did come here over the weekend, but many people are saying that, it didn't result in that kind of clash. A similar situation in Inanda as well. In fact, those residents there and those farmers have rather taken to, they wanted to sit around at the table with the chief there to have a discussion around this issue. There were other parties that were roped in. They tried to get in government departments as well, and eventually the case is now before the courts. So it seems like that kind of approach has been taken so far. There were also some incidents that were reported in the Cato Manor area not long ago. I think it was last year, if memory serves. And there as well, fortunately, there wasn't that kind of situation where residents had taken matters into their own hands. Despite that situation getting quite violent at times, in fact, I think there was a woman's home that was petrol bombed amid that land invasion as well. So at this point, it seems like the situation is fairly calm. And as I mentioned, it seems like one would hope that these negotiations that are taking place will resolve the issue.
And has there been any word from the local chief involved in this particular story there near Belito?
Not just yet, Yuveka. We did get here a little while ago, so we are looking to speak to the chief, also to get in touch with the mayor, like I mentioned, who's going to be meeting us here a bit later. So if we get an opportunity later on today, we will head out to KwaDukuza and go to that meeting and see if the chief is going to be there and try to find out exactly what's going on.
All right, thank you very much for that, ENCA.